bottle that has a built-in water filter in it. And you can either get glass or you can get this one, which is Nalgene, Nalgene. It's not plastic, so it does not have BPA. It does not have the PFASs, the PFOAs. Those are all those forever chemicals, right? Those forever chemicals are what you're getting in regular plastic water bottles when you buy bottled water. So this might be an option if you fly. You can put inside or outside water source. So they actually say you can get like pond water and put it in there. This filter's that good, and then you drink the water up through the straw. So that's an option there for fly that you can take clean water with you. So this one is the Nalgene bottle. It comes from here, epicwaterfilters.com. And you'll see it on their site. It's either glass or they'll have the Nalgene, which is, it's not, it doesn't break, but it's very safe to put your water in, and it has a filter there. Okay, so I'll go ahead and erase that. And I just wanted to give you that because I just ran across them. Oh, yes. Oh, you wanted to write it down, yes. And there is a handout there's a handout at the back of the door. It's a reference for you to take home. We'll talk about it in a little bit. And then I'm also going to give some little recipes towards the end. You might want to write that down. There's pads of paper. Okay, did everybody get that down? Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the main topic, the grains, nuts, beans, legumes. We're going to kind of cover it all. And I love this topic because it's a staple, right? It's a staple of our diet and has been for generations and generations. So I just want to start with two questions just to kind of assess to see where everybody is. All right, the first question, who knows at least one person who is gluten-free? Does anybody know anybody who's gluten-free? See a couple, okay, a couple hands. Okay, all right, and then who of you here, I'm curious if you've heard this before, whether you've heard it through a podcast, or you've read it, or somebody else has told you. Have you ever heard that eating wheat is inflammatory, that wheat is inflammatory to the body? Okay, couple. Okay, good. That's why I just wanted to see where we are. So wheat, as we know it today, is very much changed from where it used to be. And that's what I want to talk about, is to give you some knowledge to learn what healthy wheat is, how to identify it, how to look for it, and then go teach people. I really would love this church to be ambassadors to go out and teach people, because in my practice, I see people every day coming in, every day with different body complaints, okay? And they are trying to make good health decisions, and it's not happening because they're being giving misinformation. So you can really impact somebody's health a lot just by giving information into their hands and teaching them that. And people are very willing to learn when they know it's going to affect their health. So I would love for everybody to be ambassadors. All right, so we're going to talk about the difference between like ancient wheat and modern wheat, because our modern wheat that we have, it's not like we used to have, and it's actually kind of like a toxic junk food. And modern wheat is indeed making a lot of people sick. And so I want to know, like, what happened? What happened where that it was a staple for generations, and now today it's making a lot of people sick? So what happened and what changed? Pretty much everything changed in wheat. The way we grow it has changed. The way that we process it has changed. The way that we eat it has changed. And we're going to talk about each of those as we go through this. Two main factors and a little history on wheat, and it's really short, but you need to understand from where we came from to understand where we are today, because what we have today is our normal, right? We go to the store, we buy the stuff off the shelves, we grab wheat products. We've been told whole wheat is better, I get whole grain wheat. But if you don't know how to then identify it, or you don't know from where we came, you really don't understand the changes that have taken place. So, two main factors that changed our wheat industry today, the modern wheat that we have today. One dates back all the way and this is the first main factor, to the 1870s, there was a steel roller mill came into play. Why is this important? Prior to this, all mills in the United States were stone mills. Even out throughout Europe, they were all stone mills. And the stone mill would take the grain and it would crush it all together. And so you had the bran, you had the germ. It was fully alive, and it was ready to go. It was full of lots of nutrients. Then all of a sudden, the steel roller mill comes in. Well, the steel roller mill is able to separate the components. It took out the wheat, it took out the bran, and it started to only give this nice, soft, white, fluffy flour. So the flour was marketed as you can make beautiful cakes and pastries. It would rise up better. And it would also ship better, and it would store better. It wouldn't go rancid. The reason why it wouldn't go rancid, because it's killed. Like all the nutrients were taken out of it. There was nothing living in it whatsoever. So it was completely nutrient deficient. That's the first thing. And look, this steel roller mill was so popular, within 10 years, it completely replaced all the stone mills. That's a short amount of time for something that had been around for like hundreds of years. Number two, this one came in the 1950s and 1960s. Which started there in the 1950s and 1960s, it's called high input farming. So what that means, instead of taking the natural grain that came in nature, there was a lot of high input put in by humans, meaning very heavily genetically modified. They started to modify the wheat so that it would yield more crops, more yield, more profit. So they started to do a lot of genetic modifying, and along with that, in the 1950s and 1960s, came companion pesticides and fertilizers that went along with it. Today, we have pharmaceutical companies that now own like hundreds of common food brands that you shop for, from pancake mixes in the grocery store, from macaroni and cheese. Should you be concerned that a pharmaceutical company owns all those food choices? Yes. And they're under all kinds of different brands. So you may think, oh, well, I'm not going to get this brand because it's owned by them. I'm going to come over here. Well, it's owned by them. They have all these different names in the stores. You have to do a little bit of research, but all these different names lead up to one pharmaceutical company that owns that. So should we be concerned? Yes, we should be concerned. Should we be concerned that a pesticide company also owns grains and seed companies? So on this end, they're controlling the pesticides of their business. On this end, they're controlling grains and seeds. Yes, we should. And so this is what happened in the 1950s and 1960s. We started to get that high input farming. And it was considered to be a new, improved form of wheat, right? And they said, oh, we can get more yield. We could feed more people with it. This is great. We're solving the world's hunger problems. But it was far, far removed from anything else. And the reason why I asked you if you had heard if wheat is inflammatory, modern wheat we're talking about, it is one of the reasons why gluten-free diets are becoming into play and why we see so many gluten-free products out there. Is because modern wheat is very inflammatory, not only to the gut. Sometimes we think about gut problems, but I see it in other things. I see it in general malaise, fatigue, right? People are coming in, they're tired all the time. Body aches, arthritis. I've got knee pain, I've got back pain. I see a lot of back pain at my practice. So allergies, sinus, it's not just like you think of gut issues for digestion. It's a whole plethora of disease processes because the body's in this chronic inflammatory state for that. All right, so now I wanted to read to you, because there's all these authors out there talking about modern wheat. Here's what Dr. William Davis says. He wrote a book called The Wheat Belly. It's one of the more common books out there. So listen to his quote. He said, "This thing being sold to us called wheat, it ain't wheat. It's this stocky, little, high-yield plant, a distant relative of the wheat our mothers used to make muffins, genetically and biochemically light years removed from the wheat of just 40 years ago." Listen from another quote. This is online from a company called the Grain Storm. They're trying to make more people aware of modern wheat issues. It says, "We have mutant seeds grown in synthetic soil, bathed in chemicals. They're deconstructed, pulverized to a dust, bleached, and chemically treated to create a barren industrial filler that no other creature on the planet will eat." And so we wonder why modern wheat is making people sick, right? So there is increasingly more distinction. People are starting to understand the difference between gluten intolerance and modern wheat intolerance. There are some people definitely who cannot tolerate wheat. That's just to tolerate gluten. That's just their genetics, but that is a very small population. And so we shouldn't see this huge array of gluten-free foods on our shelves because it's really just a very small population. And instead, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. I'd like to educate people on, you might have a modern wheat sensitivity, because most people do, because it's reactive, not a gluten sensitivity. And gluten-free food, has anybody ever looked at the labels? They're horrible. They're full of sugar. They are devoid of most nutrients. A lot of it is junk food, so you really have to be careful in choosing that. All right, so what's our alternative? That's what I want to try to teach you some alternatives. And I'm going to start with kind of like the benchmark where, like everybody to go, but it's not feasible if you're not a baker or you don't want to bake, or you don't have time to bake. That's understandable. So first thing is milling your own flour. That is by far the best. And it sounds, to me, when I first heard it like years ago, I was like, whoa, that sounds kind of like, milling your own flour sounds like a big deal. But if you've ever taken an onion or a carrot, drop it in a food processor at home, hit the button, this is the same thing. I brought some grains, and I wanted to show you kind of how I buy them because I think it helps to eye them up. This is rye grain. These are some grains here. They just look like grains of rice. And all you do when you're making your bread is you take your grains, you're going to drop it in here. This is a stone mill. It comes out of Germany. It's very nice. You put it in there, and out comes this beautiful, beautiful flour. It smells good. It's full of nutrients, and when you taste bread, that's where the flour has just been milled and then put into it, you taste the difference. You absolutely taste the difference. It's the way bread used to be made. And let me erase this because I want to write down, when you're looking for grains, you want to look for ancient grains. And you'll see that a lot when you are shopping. It'll say ancient grains. So we're going to talk about this, the grains for the breads first, and we'll get on to the nuts. Corazon, otherwise known as kamut. You can thank a farmer for this. This is trademark. So that way people couldn't go and mess with it. It's a very part of an ancient Corazon. So these two are the same. And we have farmers to thank for this. They cared enough to preserve these grains and did not let anybody genetically modify them. So you want to look for, if you're looking for, these are wheat. You want to look for ancient grain. These are wheat, Corazon or kamut. So instead of just saying I'm going to eat wheat bread or whole grain bread, you want to look for a bread that has Corazon or kamut. Another ancient grain is spelt. All of these are not genetically modified. They're not been hybridized. That's why they're known as ancient grains. Spelt, and another one is called einkorn. Now, I like all of these. By far, these are my two favorites. I probably favor spelt a little bit more, but I like kamut a lot. And these are just small bags. because this is like my rye, but my Corazon, they come in big 25 bags, 25-pound bags that I buy from them. And you'll go through it actually fairly quickly. Let's see what else I want to say with that. Yes, and that's going to be the next step. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Are there breads in the store? I want to see here. Okay. So yes, milling your own flour is easier to go. And I put up some of the things that you're going to be using to build your own flour. I guess I wanted to touch on too. So we have anybody who likes to bake. You know, there's a difference between sourdough bread and like a yeasted bread. And I'll go through that, yes. And I see some bakers here. So I'm just real quickly go through that. In biblical times, everybody did sourdough bread. Sourdough bread, it's fermented bread. Not fermented to the point of making alcohol, but what you do with sourdough bread is you take flour, you take water, you mix it. It sits on the countertop, and you let it sit for like 7 to 14 days. You do have to feed it every day with fresh flour, and it starts to make its own yeast, its own bacteria, good bacteria. We have around here in the air is wild yeast and good bacteria. So that's what they did in Bible times. You're just pulling from what's out in nature just by mixing flour and water and letting it sit. We're not talking about quick breads. That's banana bread, blueberry tea bread, apple bread, right? Those breads don't require any type of yeast. Those have a leaven of baking soda, baking powder, salt. But we're talking about sourdough versus a yeasted bread like a sandwich bread. Okay, so sourdough bread, you would make your own leavening. You'd make your own leaven by mixing those two together, letting the yeast and the bacteria build up. Then you just take a little bit of that sourdough starter, you put it in, you mix in all your ingredients, and then you let it sit and ferment, usually over like 16 hours. What happens is it starts to pre-digest all the grains, and you get a whole bunch of nutrients coming out of that. We're going to talk about that. A regular yeasted bread is going to use something like this, an active dry yeast. Sometimes they come in those packets like Fleischmann's yeast. But when you do that, you want to sprout your grains. When you do sourdough bread, you don't have to sprout because of the fermentation process from using a natural starter. But when you're using this, you definitely want to sprout your grains, and we're going to talk about that just a moment. If you don't feel like milling your own flour and baking your bread, then you can buy your own like bread, obviously. And so that's what your handout is on there. If you look on the first page of your handout, you'll see the first one at the bottom. It says bread. Okay, we have them, yeah, like at the back. At bread, it says best. The best category is just letting you know those are the things you want to look for. You want to look for sourdough bread, soaked bread, or sprouted breads. And so it's telling you, then it gives you a number of brands that you can kind of look just to get you started for. If you go to the second page, see at the bottom says page 46, there's a good category. Do y'all see the good at the bottom? Okay, so that's just telling you those breads are still also good. It's just not as good as the best category. And if you go to the third one, if you do want to bake, but you don't want to mill your own flour, they're giving you best and good categories there and giving you some good guidance on the type of flour you want to get. So that will at least help get you started looking in the direction of organic, sprouted grains. That answered your question there with the bread? Yeah, that was a good question. Yeah, and see, you're like way ahead of me. Okay, we're going to that next. Okay, so it's important to like yeast. This type of yeast, it was first introduced in France in the 1660s. Prior to that, it was just common knowledge to do sourdough bread. That's what everybody did. They took their own, flour and water, made their own leavening. And then that has kind of been lost, but I do find a resurgence. It seems like there's more people online wanting to do sourdough bread, and people are starting to wake up to that kind of ancient way or ancestral way of preparing bread. Okay, so sprouting, and we're going to talk about sprouting nuts and sprouting grains. Sprouting is the same, whether you're sprouting nuts, you're sprouting grains like acorn or spelt, because you're going to do breads, seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds. They're all the same. You buy a sprouting jar. It has a regular jar, but it's got a screen on top. So you just unscrew this. You put whatever you want to sprout in here. You close that up. You're going to fill this with good, clean, filtered water, and you're going to let it sit overnight. In the morning, you're going to pour it out, and you're going to let that kind of sit upside down to let it drain, but the air can still get in. And now you're going to rinse it with good, clean water 2 to 3 times a day. And you're just going to rinse it, add the water, rinse it, pour it out, and then you let it sit a couple more hours. Then you go back, you pour the water, rinse it, pour it out, until you start to see tiny little bitty white tails on them. When you see that, you know that the process of germination has started, because these are grains. This is the way that they were stored. They're stored. This is a seed, but it's dormant. We wake them up by sprouting them. By sprouting them, we're going to start the process of germination. And so what does that do? What does sprouting or germination do? Number one, when we sprout. So let's write sprouting, because we're going to talk about sprouting versus soaking. When we sprout grains and nuts, a whole bunch of stuff happens. Number one, produces vitamin C. Number two, increases the B content. Vitamin B content goes up. Number three, increases carotene. Carotene is good for eye health, heart health, skin. It's a strong antioxidant and strong anti-cancer properties. This can be increased as much as 8 times just by sprouting, just by adding water and air and giving it time to sprout and germinate. That's what happens there. All right, number 4, it neutralizes. Phytic acid. So phytic acid is inherent in all grains. It's a protective property of the grain. So when wheat was grown, grains were grown in the field, they were cut down in stalks, they were laid down in the fields in piles, and the farmer would move on and cut the field, and they were laid down. The wheat would usually sit out for about 2 to 3 days. This is the old-time farming methods. During that time, then the grains that were still attached to the stalk were exposed to the dew of the ground, exposed to sunlight. Germination started. So when the farmer came back a couple days later, collected all the piles, loaded them up, and took it to the mill, guess what? All the flour produced at that time was sprouted. You were automatically getting sprouted flour already, because germination had taken place, so all of this was starting to take place. Modern farming, you cut it down, you load it up, and it goes to the mill that same day. So the seed, the grain remains dormant. None of this sprouting's happen. That's why we have to step in and do the sprouting, because our farming methods have changed. So phytic acid, if you have the grain here, just say this is the grain, and we'll just call this spelt here. Well, all around here is phytic acid. It's meant to protect the seed so that it doesn't spill out its nutrients, right? Until it's ready to be either, like if the farmer were to start growing it or germinating it, then it would happen, then this would break down. But we have to do that, because if we don't break down that phytic acid, then here's what it does. It decreases absorption in our bodies. Let's see if I get them all right. Of calcium, magnesium, what else? Iron, copper, and zinc. If we do not remove that phytic acid. Has anyone ever had homemade bread before that wasn't sprouted and it was yummy, and like an hour later you're like, oh my goodness, like I feel like the bread's expanding. Like in my stomach, you feel bloated. I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but it's most likely because it's not been sprouted, and so your body can't absorb it and it can't metabolize it as well. Plus, it's also interfering with the absorption of this from other foods that you've eaten. Sprouting also neutralizes enzyme inhibitors. Do y'all remember we talked about when doing food planning, you wanted your fats, your proteins, your carbohydrates, and I said enzymes was going to come up over and over again. You remember that? Enzymes are very important. Every time we eat, our body has to produce enzymes to digest our food. All right? Our job is to take in live food. Sprouted grains is live food. And so when we eat sprouted foods, it starts producing enzymes that helps to ease our digestion. Our digestion doesn't have to work as hard. Our bodies don't work as hard for that. So by sprouting, we're going to neutralize enzyme inhibitors that's on the outside of this, that if we were to eat this, not only we talked about is it going to decrease absorption of these minerals in our body, it's also going to interfere with our enzymes. As our enzymes come in to digest it, these are inhibitors that's going to inhibit and slow down our own body from digesting them. And then, of course, it will actually produce enzymes when we sprout. And that helps our bodies to fully take in all the nutrition that's in here, and it also makes it easier. So that's a pretty important list if you look at why sprout, what's the benefit of sprouting. And did everybody get that down? Because I'm going to erase that. Okay, yes.
Soaking nuts. When you soak your nuts,
Mm-hmm.
is that the reason for soaking nuts? Is it to get the fatty acid out of it?
So we are going to come to, we are coming to the soaking nuts, yeah. Y'all are asking a good question. Y'all are just ahead of me. That's good.
I wanted to know about rinsing.
About rinsing them, yes.
Faucet water is good.
No. Always filtered water. Always, because faucet water has arsenic and lead and fluoride. Anytime you're using that, that's why I don't even wash my fruits and vegetables in it anymore, because they're just absorbing it. So that's what, incidentally, I take this and I'll pour it in a bowl of water. Has anybody ever washed grapes that way? Oh, what, the pitcher? Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Has anybody ever washed grapes in a bowl of water before? It's kind of scary. The water, comes out really dirty. Yeah, it's an eye-opener. I think before I learned all this, I was just, washing it, whatever, well in the faucet. But when I started to do this, I was like, oh, okay. Yes, it's kind of scary. Okay, are we good if I erase this? Okay. These are the things I want you to teach other people, because these are the things they don't necessarily have heard or know about. And this seems like when you're learning about sprouting it, I just know when I did, it seemed like a big deal, but it makes such a huge impact on people's health. Really, they'll come and I'm feeling so much better. I'm more energetic. I'm lighter on my feet. They just feel good. They're not as bloated. So it really does help people. So sprouting, what are some things that you can sprout? We'll just give you some ideas, and then we're going to move into them, and I'm going to give you a few little quick recipes so that you could go home and start applying this right away. So we talked about, you can do grains, so we talked about that. Whether it's rye, spelt, barley, millet, you can't sprout, but beans, you can sprout beans. I don't always sprout my beans. I do soak them, but don't always sprout them. But you can sprout beans as well. So kidney, lima, black beans, you can put those in this jar, rinse them out until a little tail is formed, and then you're going to go right into cooking them. And all those things we just discussed is going to happen with your beans. So if you're eating beans like in brown rice, it's really going to up the nutrition.
So if you soak, I mean, if you sprout your beans, you would not have to soak them? The way we
Right. So we're going to talk about the difference between sprouting and soaking. Yep. And so you're right. You won't, once you sprout them, then they're just going to go straight into the water and you start cooking them. Yeah. And we are going to talk about soaking them for that. And so sprouted beans, too, when you do this, they're going to cook a lot quicker, because the germination process has already started. What's that?
How long does it take?
Oh, you know what? I'm glad you asked that because I know children who live like up in Virginia or something, right? So she asked like how long, does it take to sprout? So this is a funny story I'll share. So depending where you live, like it may take 3 or 4 days at one place. Down here in Louisiana, you better watch it because within like 24 hours, it's going to sprout. And here's my funny story. When I was first learning how to sprout, first they said, you want a little bit of a tail. Well, there was a barely little bit, of a white poking out when I went to bed, right? And I'm like, okay, I need to let it go. Yes, yeah, you know what happened. I woke up in the morning, the sprouts were going crazy in the inside of the jar, literally overnight. I woke up and went, oh, what happened? Like, what happened? So for down here in Louisiana, usually within about 12 to 24, usually 24 hours, there's a little tail. And as soon as you see that, you better get them out the jar like that and cook them. If it's beans, if it's grains, you're going to dehydrate them if you're going to mill them. Because if I'm sprouting grains like this, I'm getting ready to do Ezekiel bread. Incidentally, if anybody wants to do cooking classes on Ezekiel bread, I love doing homemade Ezekiel bread. It's delicious. But you do have to, because they're wet, right, after sprouting them, you have to dehydrate them fully for 24 hours before putting them in here. Otherwise, it'll gum up your processor. Yeah.
We eat quite a few beans.
Okay.
I want to sprout my red beans, kidney beans.
Mm-hmm.
I can let them soak overnight until I see that little.
Yes, you have to let it air out. So you do need a little sprouting jar for that. So you'd put the beans in here. And normally if you're doing beans, you're probably doing a big pot. So you probably would get 2 sprouting jars because you're just going to fill it up. No more than a half, probably less than half. Fill it with the filtered water. Let it sit overnight soaking. But then in the morning, you've got to turn it out. And then you're just going to let it sit like upside down. And you're going to keep checking it. And every few hours, you'll go in and you'll add more water. You'll rinse it to get them wet again. Pour out all the water and let them air out. Yeah, that's how you sprout. Right, and as soon as you see the tail, get them out, get them in the pot, and you cook them. Yes?
When I do my garden, I put my beans in I soak them.
Okay, good.
As soon as I get that little sprout in the ground, they go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good, and I'm going to talk to you about soaking too, but then you start growing them, huh? Ooh, I want to get with you. I need to learn how to do a backyard garden. You got some talents there that I want to learn for sure. Definitely. Okay, almonds, you can sprout those, whether skinless or skins on. You can sprout almonds. You can sprout lentils. Just giving you some ideas of different things you can sprout. Sunflower seeds. With the seeds, just know whenever you sprout them. So this is how I buy them. I have a bag over here. I'll get them, but I will always prepare them before I eat them. But once you sprout them, you have to eat them fairly quickly, within a day or two. So I don't sprout like large jars of seeds. The nuts I will, and we'll talk about that. But the seeds tend to very quickly kind of go bad, like within a couple days. So I just do a little bit at a time. Pumpkin seeds you can sprout. My sprouting jar I bought from iherbs.com. I think it's herbs or herb, I'm not sure. Maybe, but Amazon has a lot of them too. I bought this one because it's stainless steel. A lot of the ones I found on Amazon were aluminum, and I don't like the aluminum rust. These are all stainless, so that's why I went that route, and because I use them a lot. And then let's see what else. Sesame seeds and chia seeds. All of those can be sprouted. There are some things like oats. If I was doing, like I do an oat porridge, sourdough bread, I just buy those sprouted because they're kind of hard, I would think, to sprout. So there are certain things you can buy sprouted. So just look for like an organic sprouted oats there. Okay, we are going to talk about soaking now because we had a lot of questions about soaking. We're good with this? I'm going to erase this.
Well, when you're sprouting your beans, you're gonna cook them. So if you're sprouting nuts, what are you gonna do with them?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about that because I'm going to give y'all some different recipes to do. Yeah, for different. And like I said, I don't always sprout my beans. I'll soak them. And soaking, I think, is common for most of us in the room. But the younger generation, it is kind of missed. They stopped teaching that, and they're kind of just bringing the beans up to a quick boil, turning them down, and slow cooking them, right? So don't take for granted that, oh, yeah, well, like soak your beans. There's a lot of younger people who are raising children who don't know that, okay? So teach them that. All right, so soaking, we're not soaking them to the point or waiting till they sprout necessarily, but we are going to soak them overnight. My beans I soak for 24 hours when I'm not sprouting them. I just soak them. And just soaking them, it's going to make them more easily digestible. So easy to digest. These are the benefits of soaking. And we're going to give you some recipes here in just a moment. And the nutrients are more readily available. A lot more so than if we were just to cook them. All right, and then also like when it comes to nuts, if we're soaking them in salt water, it's also going to neutralize. Well, we talked about this. Guess what I'm going to say? Neutralize. What word's coming next? Yeah, phytic acid, which is a enzyme. Yep, inhibitor. Good. Very good. Okay, I'm going to give y'all some little recipes, and we're going to talk about the nuts as we go along. So I hope if you have a pen in hand, because this is something that you can go home and start readily applying. When you're shopping for the grains, we talked about getting organic grain from a good source. When you're shopping nuts, I have bags of these at home. I have walnuts, I have Brazil nuts, I have pecans. They all come in, and I get big bags of them. And I start to soak them. So you want to look for organic nuts that are raw. And then when you get them, then you go ahead and take care of the soaking or the sprouting.
That's from Azure?
That one comes from Azure, yeah. So you want to look for nuts not in an open bin in a store, even though they're beautiful, because they get oxidized. Azure Standard's where I get mine. This is an Adventist-owned company, too. They're out of Oregon. They're the largest supplier of organic foods across the U.S., and they do a drop every month where the semi-truck comes in and pulls up in a parking lot. You meet them with other people in your community, and you get your drop? Oh, good for you. Is that your first drop? Good. You'll have a lot of fun. It's a wonderful time to meet people in your community, and you get to talk to like-minded individuals and get to share different things with them. I like it a lot. There's 2 drops in Covington. There's a drop in North Covington, that's at Springs of Life, which is a health food store. That started off, that drop, with 15 people. That drop now has like 45, 50 people. They're going to probably have to move because they cannot fit in the parking lot. The other drop is in Covington, right by the interstate where Planet Fitness is, and Aldi. It meets in that parking lot. And that one has anywhere from 30 to 50 people in any given drop to meet there. But it's a lot of fun. You get around, and usually I'm standing there, I'm like, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? And we just start visiting, and then the truck pulls up, and everybody's getting their groceries off. It's kind of fun. They drop once a month. Drop once a month. You order online, and then they deliver, and they have really high-quality foods. All right, so we're going to talk about soaking, and these are going to be your specific recipes. So you don't want to buy from an open bin. Always buy organic raw nuts that are in sealed packages. All right, so there's no oxidation. All right, so we're going to start off with pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds that have been soaked. Very nutritious. These you can sprout or you can just soak them. Alrighty, so here's the little thing. 4 cups, or you can, I'll give you the general recipe, and then if that's too much for you, you can do less and half the recipe. 4 cups raw. Hold. Pumpkin seeds. 2 tablespoons Celtic sea salt. And we've talked about the sea salt before. I like Salina Naturally or this Baja Gold. This is a wonderful salt too. Comes from the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. It is a delicious salt, but that's up here for you to look at. Alrighty, and you are going to soak in clean filtered water. Soak for at least 7 hours. You're going to drain them. And then you want to dehydrate. Now, I always get the question, can I put them in an oven? Most ovens do not go below 170 degrees. The absolute highest you want to go in an oven is 150. But I will tell you, there's a general consensus out there that says 118 degrees of dry heat is the point you don't want to go over, because otherwise enzymes are being killed. So, in other words, you're not eating a live food anymore, right? You're killing all the enzymes. So, I always tell people, I think it's well worth it to buy a dehydrator. There's many on the market. You can get one that's not super expensive, and it will be worth your weight in gold, and you will really be adding a lot of nutrition to your diet. So, yes, can you dry it out in the sun? That's what they did, yes, traditionally, yes. And you would be the one that teaches, because you do have to watch it again down here because of the humidity. If it doesn't dry out fast enough, it's going to mildew. And so, yes.
Sometimes we'll put it in your car.
Oh, put it in your car, okay. But it has to dry out, though, quickly, and a reason why I tell you this, because I tried to do this without a dehydrator, and I tried all kinds of things. I wasn't successful. It doesn't mean you're not, if you're doing, that's great. Please, teach me. But I couldn't get them to dry out fast enough, and they started to mildew, and they got really funky smelling. So you're going to dehydrate at 105 degrees times 24 hours if you're here in Louisiana. If you live in Colorado or out in Arizona or even maybe up north, this might be done in 12 hours. So this is not a hard, fast rule. But down here, 24 hours. All right, I'm going to leave some of this up. We're going to take this off. And we're going to talk about, let's see, which ones I want to do next. Let's do pecans and walnuts. Pecans and walnuts cannot be sprouted, but you absolutely want to soak them. So pecans and walnuts. Okay, 4 cups of the raw nuts. This one is going to be 2 teaspoons. Of the Celtic sea salt. Soak overnight, or at least for 7 hours. Drain it, and then again dehydrate it. 105 degrees times 24 hours. We're going to talk about peanuts, almonds.
So you put the salt and the water, the soaking water?
Yes, yes, yeah, you're creating like a saltwater brine. Yeah, saltwater brine. And that's what, it's the salt water that's going to really help to inhibit those phytic acid. As long as you're using Celtic sea salt, you're actually adding more minerals, making it healthy, yes. And they're delicious when you dehydrate them and then you can store them. They're crispy, they taste really fresh, and they have just a mild salt flavor. It's nothing, no big salt flavor at all. Okay, let's do peanuts, almonds, cashews, just to give you an idea. I don't know what type of nuts everybody likes, but macadamia nuts, those are delicious. I did those the other day. Okay, those are going to be 4 cups of the nuts. This one is going to be 1 tablespoon here. So we're going to change that, 1 tablespoon of the Celtic sea salt. Again, soak overnight, or at least for 7 hours. Drain them in the morning. You are going to dehydrate them again, 105 degrees for 24 hours. The only exception here for this dehydration is going to be cashews. Let me just write this over here. Because most cashews come to us already with a twice heated process, that's just the way it is in today's market. The cashews, you can go ahead and bake them in an oven 200 to 250 degrees because the enzymes are already destroyed when we get those. Yeah. So you can go ahead and just bake them 200 until they dry out and they're crispy for that. Just till they're crispy. Yeah, so you're going to have to check them. The 200 and I would check it probably every 20, 30 minutes just to make sure. And so doing this here, because once you have this, you can now make your own peanut butter, your own almond butter, your own cashew butter. If you sprout your almonds, then you're going to have a sprouted nut butter. And homemade nut butters are delicious. So let me write that down for you. And we are going to, we're going to erase all this now. So once you have the nuts that are either sprouted or soaked, to make your own homemade nut butter. So this stuff is easy stuff. I mean, you can take nuts, you could put it in a jar, you can add water, right? You can add a little salt, stir it, let it sit, and then you can dehydrate it. This is not complicated stuff. It sounds like when you learn, like, oh, homemade nut butter, but it's super easy. So once you sprouted the nuts, so here's the recipe for this. 2 cups of either sprouted or soaked, whichever one you're doing, nuts that are also dehydrated, right? You always have to dehydrate them to get all the water out. So dehydrate. So once you start there, then 3/4 cup coconut oil. There's healthy fats adding into the nuts, which are healthy fats. 2 tablespoons raw honey. And I did put some honey up here so you can see the richness of the honey. The raw honey, over time will start to solidify. That's how you know it's not been processed honey. Some of it comes with a little propolis, which is like the beeswax on top as well. This is a wildflower honey, so it's. Is that from here or? That's from Azure. That's Azure's, yeah. Yes, and I do. I have local honey as well, but when I saw wildflower honey, I'm like, oh no, I got to get that too. Yeah, so I do use both. I just look for local honey. I do look for like a credible source, and I always ask and find out if make sure it's not processed. I want it raw. Yeah. So we've got that, let's see, coconut, 2 tablespoons, raw honey, 1 teaspoon, oh, my pen's running out, of the sea salt. Yep, Celtic sea salt. You always want to use it. Okay, then you're just going to grind the nuts and salt together. Get those together. Then go ahead and add in the rest, the coconut oil and your honey, till it's all mixed up. You'll have like a crunchy nut butter. You want to store in the refrigerator. Store in the refrigerator.
How long does it last?
So fresh nut butters really like, especially if you sprout them and stuff, you can keep them a couple weeks. I wouldn't keep them past a month because I just think over time, like oxidation. So I usually make like half rest. I make small batches. I prefer to do that, unless you eat a lot, nut butters, yeah.
Do you have to add the oil and the honey? Just have plain nut butter? If you can just do the nuts and the sea salt, that's what she's asking.
But then you have to add in something
To kind of make
to mix it, yeah, to kind of hold it together. Because the nuts and the salt is just going to be like a fine, like powder.
yes, it will be
It won't be like a creamy.
butter that you buy in the store. It's just like it's almond butter. It's just the almond.
I think those are, okay, and so I see where you go. So there are certain grinders, like mills, like this is not going to do nut butters. It'll do anything else, but it's not going to do nut butters. There are certain mills that's made specifically for that. So yes, you can. For the average person who doesn't have that, they would have to add that in. But if that's something you're interested in, then you might want to look at the grain mill that's specifically for.
Some juicers you can use also,
Okay, to do that. So that may be something you can look and just pull from the oils and the honey. Yeah, for that.
There are no raw cashews, because I remember you said a while ago the cashews are just dead.
Oh, yes. As far as I know, most of the cashews that come to us today, they're already been heated.
Why?
Twice. I don't know. It's the processing. And, I have to go look on Azure because they do things different and they do kind of go against.
Sell good cashews, actually?
Well, that's what I've got to go look. So cashews from them I've not bought.
Okay.
Yes. But I have done cashew butter, and I'm trying to think, I just bought organic in the past, but I need to look specific for Azure because they do buck conventional systems. They figure it out.
I think I saw at Costco, the Lula, some of those cashews, that they have the organic raw, but it's unsalted. So I think actually at Costco they have the raw.
On there. Okay. Okay. So you can still.
A lot of the nuts now. I don't know why.
They just. What did you?
Feel it, yeah.
Oh, distilled nut. I don't know. I've never heard of that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Everybody's got that down. I'm going to erase that. We are about done. We are about done. Okay, and then the last thing are the beans, and just real quick, so we know about soaking the beans. Just sometimes we soak them for 8 hours. You want to kind of hit 12 to 24 hours, and preferably 24 hours for soaking beans. And if you're doing black beans, you're going to add to the water. What is it, 2 tablespoons? Yeah, 2 tablespoons, and this is for black beans only. 2 tablespoons lemon juice, because it needs an acidic solution. Or if you eat yogurt, you can use 2 tablespoons of whey, which is the yellow liquid that rises to the top of yogurt if you eat yogurt. One of those, you're going to add those to black beans. This is for black beans. And then go ahead and soak them for 24 hours. When you're done soaking them, you pour them out, you replace the water, right, and you're ready to cook them. Bring them to a boil, and you probably already do this, but there's a lot of foam that rises. You skim off the foam, get rid of all that, then you turn it down, you cook them very slowly. All right, that is it. Any questions?
I
So so sprouting is the one that's going to give you all those benefits, that increase vitamin C, increase vitamin V. Soaking will still help with digestion, still make nutrients more available, but sprouting does so much more. Yeah, so much more. Yeah.
I just bought some sprouted corn tortilla shells from Whole Foods. And Ezekiel bread that they have frozen, is that sprouted also?
Oh, yes. So Ezekiel bread is sprouted, and as well as Foods for Life makes that. They make the sprouted corn tortillas as well. So the only thing with like Ezekiel bread, why I like to make my own, is because the store-bought does put extra soy like in there, and soy is so heavily genetically modified. I mean, if we were living way back when, I'd not have a problem, but our soy today is heavily genetically modified. So that's why I try to make like my own. And it's a pastor, if there's an interest in anybody wanting to do sourdough bread or Ezekiel bread, we can meet here one Sunday or something and do that, cooking classes. So,
You have to live in the kitchen. Work out too, and then
so,
time to do all
and it seems like, I know, it seems like a lot, and I get that. I'm so glad you said that. She said it seems like a lot, how you get time to do this. Look, I had to come to that too when the knowledge like just started coming. I started getting more exposed to this. I had a choice, and it's kind of like I have to find the time. I have to do it. The thing is, it seems like a lot because we're learning things, we're relearning things, right? But if we go back just a few generations, they're like, yeah, that's the way we make bread, right? That's what we do. So it seems like a lot because we're relearning, but I promise you, within a short order of time, it just becomes second nature. And you're like, this is what I do. You know, this is what I'm doing this morning. I mix the bread. I do that. Okay, I'm letting that sit. That has to ferment 5 hours. I'll go do something else. Come back. It just becomes a natural rhythm of life. So it's overwhelming at first because it seems like new knowledge, but it's relearning it. And as you do it, I promise you, it will be like second nature. Like second nature. How long? Okay, so I store them. That's a very good question. When they comes in the bag, I put all of mine in canning jars. I have a refrigerator full of seeds and grains, and they can last. Azure tells them they can last for several years as long as you keep them cool. And there's sometimes there'll be vacuum sealers that you can do, but I go through mine fast. I don't. I store them, and I might have mine, I don't know, 8-10 months at the most. Yeah.
Now, I have a soya bella. I don't know if you've heard of that. I put my almonds in it and make I make almond milk.
Okay. I'm not familiar with soy bell. Like, is that a brand name? Is that a?
Yeah, that's just the brand name. But you can
Okay.
use any kind of nuts in it. But I use it for making almond milk.
Okay. It's a processor?
It's like a pasta.
A little okay. Soya bella. Do you? I'll write that up there. Do you like that?
Bella.
Okay. Thank you.
But I'm just wondering,
So she uses this to make almond milk. That works for her. I'll look at that. But you were saying you wonder.
I use that with the cereals. But I was also wanted to ask, can I buy nut butter from Ensure? I guess I have to look at the.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You can definitely buy nut butter from them. They have good ones. Yes. Yes. I have a lot of fun doing that, making myself. But yes, you can from Azure.
I like to cook. I only cook because I have to eat.
Okay. Fair enough. She said she doesn't like to cook, but only because she has to eat. That's it. Okay. Yes.
Your grain milk.
Mm-hmm.
What kind is that and where do you get it?
So this one's called it's fancy, ready, Mock Mill 100. It sounds like a infomercial, Mock Mill 100. It's made in Germany, and it runs around $430. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, she said it's cheap, and she's right for grain mills, because grain mills these days are going crazy in prices. And if you think when you buy like breads, like really good quality breads are like $7 to $9 a loaf, believe me, this is already paid for itself. And the sourdough bread and Ezekiel bread I've been able to make and share with my family.
Where did you buy that?
Oh, online. I mean, I just went online.
Is it on the paper you gave us?
It's not on the paper that I gave you. And I was trying to think of the web. I have it at home, the website. But I mean, if you Google it, you can buy from a number of people. But I just bought it from this lady and I forgot her name, but she had a real spiritual emphasis about her Ezekiel bread, and she does a presentation, and I'm like, oh, I want to support her, and I ordered it from her. But you can get it online, Mock Meal 100. I'll write that up here. And that's just a number of meals that's out there, but when I was shopping and comparing them, I really like this one. It does everything I need it to do. All right. If anybody else has any other questions, you please feel free to come up. And if you want to look, I think it helps to look at the product just so you know what you're looking at. But thank you all very much. I appreciate it.